What's going on, everyone, and welcome back. Another patch is in the books for Teamfight Tactics 9.23, and today we're going to go over all the best comps and a little bit about what the changes have caused in the meta. But before we jump into it, I want to introduce you to today's video sponsor and one of the best profile and match history sites out there, UTFT.gg. UTFT.gg is made by one of the largest League of Legends sites, U.gg. It's super easy to use. All you have to do is go to UTFT.gg, enter your region and your summoner name, and click on match history. But they're adding some new stats on there that no other site out there has right now. They use what they call the Big Brain Index and the Lucker Dog Index. The Big Brain Index puts together all the value of your synergies and items used together to show you how well you're optimizing what the game is giving you. There's also a Lucker Dog Index, which will show you the total value of all the things you've gotten in your build. Taking a look at this match pulled from top player Soju, you can see that he got second place, but the person above him got a lot more value on the Lucker Dog Index, showing that they just generally got more units and a little bit luckier with the drops. Analyzing the game this way helps you understand what's going on in the match and what was played, and gives you a general sense of how well that you're playing relative to everyone else. Head over to utft.gg and start learning you some stats. First up, we saw a reduction in the proc chance for Glacials, as well as an increase for Olaf's maximum mana. This prevents him from ulting as soon as he did before in the match, and means that Glacials have a little bit harder time shutting down their opponents. Now, we'll talk about Glacial builds in a moment here and what this means. It actually doesn't mean too much for the Glacials. They're still pretty powerful, but with some changes to Ezreal, we're gonna see him step up a little bit in this meta. Ezreal's maximum mana has been reduced, and his cast time for his ability has been cut in half. So he's now a lot more effective, and I love running Jewel Gauntlet on him in 9.23. Additionally, some units have been boosted pretty heavily in their 3-star state, but I think the most notable of these is gonna be Kindred's damage going up on her ability, Ezreal going up, and Sion going up as well. They all got a pretty significant boost to their ability when they are 3-star, and I think all three are now viable to go for 3-star if you have it in your build. The health of Yorick's minions was reduced by quite a bit, especially at the 3-star, and this was hugely necessary. He created a lot of disruption in your ability to shut down light builds and summoner builds. We saw a very important nerf to early woodland units, specifically Maokai and Ivern, who were just dominating the first and second stage of the game, being very, very tanky and generally just useful to put in your build. Now, they're still gonna be really good early game units, and they're still gonna be able to carry you through the first 2 stages if you find them. They're just a little bit less of an easy I win the first 2 stages pick. We finally saw a reduction in the attack speed for Iceborne Gauntlet, thankfully. At the end of set 1 and all through set 2, Iceborne Gauntlet has just been dominating because it prevents enemies from getting mana to cast, and it also prevents hyper carries from shredding through your team. Overall, just a very powerful item. Even with this nerf, it's still a great pickup. And lastly, of the most notable in the patch notes, I want to mention the bug fix for Diana. Diana's shield orbs used to be able to hit multiple targets per orb. This has been adjusted. They listed it as a bug fix, but realistically, this now makes Diana a lot less effective. Her shields are still gonna keep her alive, but it takes her from being a early game powerhouse and working into late game builds to just being a moderate unit. There isn't really any 6 Inferno builds that are really meta right now. You can find some that work, but in general, there's better builds to run than Inferno, so I wouldn't see her showing up as much as we did in 9.22. The first build we're gonna look at today, as we just saw a change to the Glacial units, is gonna be 2 Glacial variants. And I'm putting these 2 together because realistically they rely on very similar core units, but it depends on what you're going up against late game. Now, the first variant is gonna be 6 Glacial. Especially with Ezreal getting stronger in this meta, it means that he's now gonna be easier to pick up and use, and with his 3-star getting better, you even had a chance to push towards 3-star on Ezreal as well. Now, with 6 Glacial, you are gonna want the Frozen Mallet in order to convert your 6th unit into a Glacial without having to run another Glacial unit, because actually some of the Glacial units aren't crazy strong. And this is also why we saw in 9.22, a lot of people were running Lux for the bonus 2 Glacial rather than trying to get 6 core Glacial units. The most important units here are gonna be the Olaf and the Ezreal for your 2 main Glacial units, and you'll want to throw in the Kindred to get the Ranger bonus, as well as getting the Shadow bonus with Sion. This is going to be your core setup, and what's going to allow you to deal a lot of damage plus the extra damage from Kindred. And realistically, because the shadow bonus is so good and Kindred is so good, it just works out in this build overall. Add in Braum, Volibear, and Warwick to get you to the 5 Glacial mark, and then you want to convert Scion into a Glacial with the Frozen Mallet. Now you have a lot of flexibility on what unit you put for your last in this build. Generally, you can put almost anything. You can put in a Master Yi, you can put in a Zed, you can put anything that helps your build work. Personally, I would put in a Taric as your last unit. It gives you the Warden buff with the Braum, and I think also Taric is just very slept on right now. He's a very powerful unit, gives you some great immunity if you position him properly, and because there's not a lot of people going for him, it's easier to get to that 2-star Taric, which is where you want to get to with 5-cost units to put him into your build. Positioning-wise is very straightforward. You want to keep your front line in the front in a line so that none of them actually get hyper-focused. Make sure Braum is on the outside edge of the enemy team so that he gets attacked first, so he'll put his shield up at the beginning of the round, because you might get lucky and you might stop some projectiles that come through with that shield. Put your Ezreal and your Kindred in the back line to make sure they're safe and they can deal a lot of damage. Just keep in mind that Ezreal is a little bit shorter range, so he'll have to position himself closer to the enemy that you get to. And just make sure that Olaf is protected in the middle of the front line so that he isn't hyper-focused by anyone on the edges. Item-wise, Rageblade and Death Edge work great on Olaf as well as on Kindred, so you can work that up in there. A Bloodthirster also works well on Olaf and Kindred, and also for any backline unit, Rapid Fire Cannon works awesome because it makes sure that they stay away from a lot of the AoEs that are happening in the middle of the board. You can also experiment with running Jeweled Gauntlet on Ezreal because he got the buff to his ability, and it's a lot easier for him to cast it now, which means that he's going to be hitting pretty dang hard with that ability. Now, the one downside with Glacial is it's hard for Glacial builds to get to a backline and shut them down. So if you run it up against a 6 Mage build or a Summoner build, it can sometimes be difficult to shut down the backline. It also means that against caster builds, you might just get AoE down before your Glacial units can make a difference. So in this case, there's an alternate Glacial build that I recommend, which is going to be 3 poison for Glacial. In this build, you're still going to want the core Glacials of Olaf and Ezreal, and then you add in Braum and Volibear to get your 4 Glacial bonus. You don't need a Frozen Mallet in this case. Then you're going to need to add in 3 poison units, and poison is one of the best counters to late game caster builds like Mage or Summoner because it prevents them from getting their abilities off as quickly. If we're talking poison, you need to get yourself a Singed because he is absolutely awesome, especially if you put a Morale-Nomicon on him and he's just spreading his filth across the land and preventing anyone from healing. For your other 2 poison units, you can run a Kog'Maw on the back, which is generally just a decent damage output unit and a good backline unit. And you can put a Mundo up front, which gives you general tankiness and frontline. And if you put it in with the Volibear and the Olaf, it gets you the 3 Berserker bonus, which is nice to have. And the last unit is anything you want to work into it, but in this case, I would still recommend putting in something like a Taric to give you just general more tankiness and good frontline. Items are generally the same for Olaf and Ezreal, but if you end up going with Kog'Maw, you can put in Ludens because he does get a lot of casts off, and then you want to move items onto the Singed to give you more effectiveness. For Singed, I think some of the best items are going to be Morale-Nomicon, so he's spreading the anti-heal across the entire enemy team. And I also like running a Trap Claw on him, so if any time he gets hit by an AoE, you'll get a free CC out of it as well. Up next, let's talk about Foreshadow, probably one of the most powerful synergies in the entire game, and it's not hard to see why. If you looked in set 1, the Imperial bonus was the same thing. You get double damage for up to 4 units in the game, and double damage is just so hard to beat, especially since a lot of the Shadow units in the game are already good at base without needing any synergy bonuses on top of them. So it makes sense that we actually go into Shadow a lot to get a lot of bonus damage out of this. In this case, this Shadow build is going to be very powerful. Now, because you only need 4 Shadow units to get the bonus, there's some flexibility on what units you put around them, but the core Shadow units are Master Yi, Malzahar, Kindred, and Veigar. Especially in this patch, since Veigar got updated, so he will now execute summoned minions that are lower star than him, so you can actually get a lot of extra efficacy out of Veigar. In this build, you need good frontline. Yorick and Nasus work great because they have a lot of longevity per unit, and since you already have 2 light with this, you can put a 3rd light in the game, but since you already have Kindred, putting in Vayne works great. It gives you 2 ranger bonus and finishes off the 3 light bonus, which is always great to have on the Yorick. And since you have the Master Yi in there, you may as well get the 2 Mystic bonus. You can put in the Soraka, which gives you the Mystic bonus for the magic resistance, but also means that you get a nice effect from her ability, and if she gets picked off by an assassin, she'll trigger the light bonus for the other 3 lights that are on the board. Item-wise, you're focusing most of your item stacking on the Vayne and the Kindred. Vayne works great with a Rage Blade and a rapid-fire cannon, so she can get her passive off and sit in the backline. Same thing goes for Kindred, but Kindred you'll actually want to have either a Gunblade or a Bloodthirster to make sure that she keeps herself alive. Especially if you get to 3-star on Kindred, she's gonna hit really hard, so getting the extra ability damage is gonna be nice. Yorick works great with Morellonomicon, because again, any units that are summoned by a summoner will get the benefit of Morellonomicon, and in this case, I like running Redemption on Yorick so the front line stays alive even longer, because even if Yorick dies, the Redemption will still affect the minions that he spawned afterwards. Positioning here again will depend on what's on the board, where the elemental hex cells are, but in general, you want to keep your front line far up front and put your back line in the back. This isn't a very overly complicated setup for the positioning itself. Up next is one of my personal favorites, 6 Mage for Ocean. Ocean saw a buff in the 2-tier and 3-tier version of the synergy because it really wasn't ever worth it to go to 4 or 6 Ocean unless you had the Lux. But now it's a little bit better to get there, and realistically, there's a couple mages in the game that are very hard carries, namely Brand. Brand is probably one of the strongest hyper carries in the game right now, and if you can protect him well enough, he can deal crazy damage to the enemy team. In this build, just optimal to get 5 mages and a mage cap to convert a 6 unit into a mage. So you're gonna want Talia, which is actually a lot stronger now. She got her stun increase, and it's easier for her to use it. So you're actually gonna see a lot more stun duration coming out of Talia when you have her in there, and it's why I run her up in the front line as well. Then you're gonna wanna add Vladimir for good tankiness, because he heals himself a lot in the front. Then put in Syndra and LeBlanc for extra damage, and of course Brand for your hyper carry potential. You can even make Syndra into hyper carry because she does a great amount of damage herself, but Brand is a lot more consistent. Since Talia is in there and you're desperate for good frontline in this build, I would recommend putting in a Malphite. This gives you the 2 mountain bonus, which is great for a squishy build like this. It keeps one of your units alive. It's like essentially a reverse Phantom from set 1. And additionally, running a mage cap on Malphite is great because it makes that AoE that he does that much more potent because he can stun twice once he has the 6 mage bonus. That means you have 2 Ocean so far, and you're gonna wanna get to 4 Ocean, and you do this by adding in a Thresh and a Nami. Nami is great for great AoE disruption and keeps your team alive, and of course Thresh is just a good support unit to have into the build. And since Malphite's already a Warden, putting in the Thresh is great because you get the double Warden bonus and you get the 4 Ocean bonus. This build is a lot of fun to run. If you get it online, it's really powerful. Really the only thing that can stop this build late game is gonna be a Poison build that's just higher level than this, because Poison just works wonders against casters. Positioning wise, I'd put the Talia, the Vladimir, and the Malphite up front, with Malphite on one of the outside edges so that he casts right away, and you'll get CC and then survivability from the Vladimir and the Talia. Place your Nami, Syndra, Brand, and LeBlanc in the backline to make sure that they're safe. And then put Thresh anywhere you need to put him in order to protect your backline from assassins or anyone that's gonna get in their way. If they're not running assassins, you can easily move Thresh up to the front line, but it all depends on what you're going up against. Item-wise, get a Morellonomicon and a Rage Blade on Brand. You can also get an RFC or Ludens or even a Seraph's Embrace or a Shojin's to make sure that he casts as much as possible. Then of course you're gonna want the Mage's Cap on the Malphite for the conversion, and then you can run a Death Cap for the extra damage if you need to. Additionally, any defensive items you put on Vladimir, especially if you get him to 3-star, which isn't that hard to do, will make him a force to be reckoned with. You can put a Phantom Dancer, Warmogs, Dragon's Tooth, whatever you want, but the tankier he gets from items, the more often he's gonna be able to proc his heal, and the more he's gonna be sitting up at the front line just laughing at the enemy team, especially with the 6 mage bonus where he's just casting that heal twice every time he does. Coming up next, let's talk about 6 summoners. This is probably one of the top builds in the last patch, and for good reason. You get a lot of extra tankiness, especially out of the Malzahar minions and the Yorick minions that spawn, and then having the extra HP on them from the synergy bonus means that you just have natural tankiness and damage coming out of the build. Couple that with the fact that adding a Morellonomicon on any summoner means that they apply the Morellonomicon debuff to anyone the summoned units attack, means that you have a very flexible and very safe build. Now there's no conversion items, so you will need to get all 6 of the summoners in the game. It's gonna be Azir, Yorick, Zyra, Malzahar, Zed, and Annie. This will give you a lot of different options and good units spawning on the board, and just makes it a very flexible build overall. Your last two units can be a little flexible, but I would recommend finishing off the synergies that you're almost done with in the build, and that's gonna be Inferno, since you have 2 Inferno on the board already with the Annie and the Zyra, so putting in a Diana works well. Diana did get nerfed with that bug fix in this patch. You can work in other Infernals if you want, but this one is the easiest one to pick up as she's very low cost. Additionally, since you have the Azir in the build already, you have 1 of the 2 needed for Desert, so you can put in a Kha'Zix, which is generally good for taking out backline, gives you good damage. He's also very squirrely because he will disengage when he uses his ability, and you'll get the debuff of Desert, which helps you with tanky targets, especially if people are running Warden. Positioning wise, you want to keep all your units in the backline and have 2 units in the front that I recommend, Azir and Yorick. Azir you want to be taking damage second and Yorick taking damage first, but realistically all you're doing is buying time until your summoners start summoning the units onto the board, and that's when you start taking over. Diana, Kha'Zix, and Zed will give you the 3 assassin bonus, and they'll wreak havoc in the backline, so you want to make sure that your units are far enough back that you'll spread out the enemy team when the round begins. Item-wise, you want items on Yorick and Zed. I like running the Morellonomicon and Redemption on Yorick. And for Zed, Dragon's Tooth and Death Edge are pretty core to make sure he doesn't get picked off by AoE, and he's able to get a lot of extra damage from the Death Edge stacking up. For this last item, you can get a defensive item like a Warmogs, but I'd recommend a Guardian Angel, which makes sure that if he gets picked off accidentally by some stray ability, you'll be able to get him back onto the board without losing him. Kha'Zix is also great, especially with the Assassin bonus, so you can put some extra items on him. Phantom Dancer and Giant Slayer for Kha'Zix are great because you'll be able to get the extra attack speed from those 2 items, gives him a little bit of tankiness, and he's better at taking down tanky targets with the Giant Slayer. And lastly, where would we be without 6 Light? This build is still very strong. We saw a small reduction in it in this patch with Nasus getting hit pretty hard, but in general it's still very powerful and very effective. This still does rely on you hyper rolling in the early game because a lot of the light units are rather weak and low cost. You want to make sure you can get at least Nasus and Vayne to 3-star as fast as possible before other people take it up. Getting Jax to 3-star is nice as well, but not as necessary. Aatrox is also a great pickup, but way more expensive since he is a 3-cost unit. Now in 9.22, we did see people running with the light conversion item. I think it's actually better now to just get 6 solid light and get an 8 build on top of that. So you're gonna want all 6 light units that are the best: Nasus, Soraka, Vayne, Jax, Aatrox, and Yorick. And anytime you have 2 extra units to put in a build, it's always great to get Cloud or Mystic or both. So since you have 2 slots left and you already have the Soraka in the build with Mystic, go ahead and put in a Janna and a Yasuo. This will give you the global dodge chance with Cloud and give you the global magic resistance with the Mystic. Item-wise, I still recommend putting a Morellonomicon and a Redemption onto the Yorick. Iceborne Gauntlet is great to have in this build, and I personally like putting it on Nasus because I will usually have him on the outside edge so he procs it early. Stack up great items on the Vayne. This can be any mixture of Rage Blade, Bloodthirster, Rapid Fire Cannon, Giant Slayer, etc. But you want to make sure it gets a lot of attack speed and range on her so she can just shred the enemy team. Static Shiv is also a good flex pick on her if you can't get the other items that I just listed. And last, you get some pretty good effectiveness out of the Yasuo, especially if you get him leveled up really quickly. You can even run a Jeweled Gauntlet on him because he will focus 1 unit and hit pretty hard. But additionally, you can do Shojins because once he gets that first cast off, he'll be able to attack and get that second cast off even easier. And then some kind of defensive item like a Warmogs or a Phantom Dancer. Positioning wise, put your 2 Mystics, Janna and Soraka, in the back along with Vayne, and then put everyone else up front because realistically, you want the chain of light units proccing to start early. So put all your other units in the front, make sure that your damage units are protected like your Aatrox, and then just watch the light show happen in front of you. And that's gonna do it for the 9.23 Best Comps for Teamfight Tactics update. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and if you liked the video, be sure to hit that like button down below, because when you do, magical things happen with the YouTube algorithm that helps this video get seen by more people. If you like my content, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification icon, because if you don't hit the bell icon, you won't be notified of any new content that I put out. If you have any questions for me or you just want to come and hang out, check me out on my live stream, twitch.tv/drybear, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.